Hi there, everyone. I'm Jennifer Viwersi, one of the co-directors of Music for Your Inbox. And today we're going to have another one of our artist chats. We're going to be talking with Lacey McKinney about her practice and also in particular about the piece we're presenting by her, Reconfiguration 67. So let me get Lacey invited and we'll have a chat with her. Hi.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Great. It's so nice to talk to you. Thanks for joining us today. I see behind you is a beautiful painting or a piece, and oh, it's the one.
Yep, that's the one.
Amazing. Reconfiguration 67. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's strange in the modern era, like we've never gotten to actually chat. So like it's nice to hear your voice and talk to you. And I was wondering if we could start. I'm gonna make it vague on purpose. I would love to hear about your your path to where you're creating art now, whether that's like really early, like when you got interested in different creative practices or your career path, anything like that, or even just how you got to the series you made into this particular piece. I'd love to hear what's your path been like?
Great question. Um, I've always been interested in art. I'm sure you hear that from like every artist talk. They say that. But my household was very creative. My dad's a musician. My dad's a drummer and he's a musician.
Oh, cool.
Um, and my mom's very creative. And I feel like I kind of inherited this kind of matrilineal tradition of craft. So I think that's very common with people that I talk to. So like I learned sewing from my mother, my grandmother, and like different handicrafts and drawing, painting, photography, that kind of stuff. And I also have to give a lot of credit to grade school art teachers. My teachers were always super encouraging to me. And I think teachers need a lot more support than they get these days. So I always give a shout out there. But in college, I was more drawn to the figure and representational art. Specifically, I became interested in traditions of art making in a feminist framework, and specifically using the figure or the body as a way to take back agency, um, and women being authors of their own image. So that's sort of what started me on the path I am now, and that resonates in the work that I'm making now. The work in this series, the photogram collages, reconfiguration, um, those I worked on for 4 or 5 years, but currently I'm kind of transitioning and shifting into another series. Um, but some of those things resonate in this work too, I think, because I'm kind of looking at how the feminine body is kind of positioned as the site of contention, and what does that mean? And especially with looking at gestures and postures, because to make them, I'm using my own body and out in the sun doing a 10-minute exposure and trying to stay still for 10 minutes in a certain pose. So that got me thinking about gestures specifically. And I learned about this photographer named Marianne Wex. Have you heard of her? From the 70s. Really fascinating work that she did where she was documenting how people express gender through body language. And so, like, some people are curled up with their legs in, some people are spread out. So that was super interesting and influenced this series a lot in terms of thinking about some of those themes. Yeah, so that's sort of my background in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've kind of touched on so many things that I'm like really curious about. So, so the Reconfiguration series, you mentioned it's kind of a feminist perspective, like looking at how like bodies shape themselves. Um, can you talk about, because I think there are like over 80 works in the series as far as I could see. And can you talk about like how that series in particular, what you were exploring and how your exploration changed over time?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think I started to really kind of delve into like how our body is shaped in different ways, whether it's like temporarily with a posture or gesture or like in more permanent ways. So in other words, like how do our beliefs actually manifest physically and shape our bodies? Um, and that also kind of led me down this path of looking for different references of figures grappling with each other because I think like the power dynamic and like struggle between different people is really interesting to me and like the visual metaphors. So then I started researching Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and like pulling from videos and photographs of people fighting. And what I found to be really interesting about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is that um, like the most special thing about it is the ability of like a smaller, weaker opponent to be able to overpower a bigger, stronger opponent by bringing them to the ground and doing this grappling in their groundwork. And also like the images of the figures intertwining became really beautiful to me. So I started looking at that too. And it's just so I love working in the studio because it just leads you down like so many different pathways. Um, I have this example over here that kind of demonstrates what I'm trying to talk about. So there's I don't know if you can get it, it's hard to see. So that kind of gives you the intertwining a little bit.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I think something really important that you pointed out is like, figuration can be an individual or it can be like multiple people. And especially when you're thinking about like systems,
Yeah.
something that's really striking to me about your work is how it's not really about like individuals, it's about like entanglements. And uh is that something you were really thinking a lot about, in particular, like this idea of like entangled and almost like you can't tell where one starts and the other begins?
Yeah, I love that's so cool that you notice that. That's like an intuitive kind of way that I work is like how do you complicate these images and um like exploring the idea of self and other, like you talked about how sometimes the image can be confusing and you don't know where one thing begins or another one ends. And for me, that kind of speaks to exploring the idea of self and other and also interconnection. And that I think is a main theme that I'm kind of focusing even closer on now. Um, it's weird because I'm focusing on it closer, but also zooming out a little bit. But I have another one that kind of illustrates what you're talking about with the entanglements over here. Um, so this is another photogram where the limbs are kind of tangled with
Yeah.
each other. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of also points on another thing I wanted to kind of ask you about is like there was a big material shift as the series progressed. Like there was a lot of kind of painting and collage in the beginning, and then you moved to the solar dyes. And I was really
Hmm.
curious about kind of what you were discovering as you made that transition, and what how it was kind of shaping your understanding about the interconnection, entanglement, and the form through that kind of material shift too.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like I feel like I'm the kind of artist who like if I have an idea, I'm not bound. I don't feel like I'm bound to a specific media or medium. So if I have like a concept, I'll just get in the studio and try to work through, have a revelation on, okay, what's the best process that aligns with this idea. And so like shifting from paintings to cyanotype is interesting because of how much the media contrasts with each other. Like the photograms are they're very physical, but yet ethereal and ghostly at the same time because there's this aspect of like you're gathering like the sweat from your body's going onto the print. So it's like recording all these bodily fluids and it's very visceral. But yet when you look at the images, they're this combination of like fluid but also like air almost, if that even makes sense,
Yeah.
or glow or light. Um, and then like painting is more fleshy to me, and it's like the media of flesh. So I think like like thinking about collapsing that mind-body dualism and how different medias can portray the body in different ways is really interesting to me. And it's sort of just like this puzzle I'm trying to figure out still. So that's why I'm just so there's not enough time in like one lifetime to explore everything you can do.
Totally. Yeah, what was striking me as I like looked at them is collage is so much, or like in painting and in particular the way you kind of created maybe sometimes the illusion of collage. Were they always actual collage, or were they sometimes paintings meant to look like collage?
Are you talking about the paintings or the photogram ones? The
The
paintings?
paintings, yeah.
So most of the paintings early on in the series are they're painted to look like collage, but there's a couple that actually are cut up and looking like collage. So it's kind of a little bit of both.
Yeah. I thought that was really like as a viewer that was exciting to even like wonder like the illusion of layers versus the
Mhm.
like physical layers, but also like as the series goes, to see the layers change to the photogram where the boundaries are even more like amorphous or like hard to distinguish. You sent us this really cool photo of you creating one of the photograms where there was like a skeleton laid out and like a baby's kind of shape and like botanicals. And when I was
Mhm.
looking at the picture of you kind of creating with the sun, I was like, oh, I can see all of these little details. I know exactly what's happening. And then when you see the result, that lack of like color distinction and contrast makes your relationship to the objects like suddenly like it's disoriented in this really cool way where you might not even have noticed a detail at first, and then you have to like kind of dive deeper. Um, were you finding like, or maybe that was just me kind of observing that, but like, were you finding like this idea of boundaries kind of shifting as you moved through the different mediums?
Oh yeah, that's really cool. I love how you describe your experience, like your looking experience. That's super informative. And also how you were talking about layering and the light and shadow also is so appropriate for the film Notes of Care because I feel like this work, like the way that you and Cassia curated it to go with the film is like perfect because when I'm watching the film and looking at like the layers and the transparencies and the light and shadow, I'm like transported back to my studio where I'm making the photograms and the collages. And I'm like, oh, this just feels like so intuitively like aligned and parallel. So that's really cool that you describe it like that in the film too. But you were talking about like the boundaries of like the different elements of the physical artwork kind of coming together. Um, well, I guess like in terms of collage, and it also I think this goes with the film too. Uh, it's like I love how it's improvisational. So you have all these elements that you've laid out for yourself, and then you're just looking to see what conceptual visual relationships emerge on their own, right? So you're kind of just responding to the images as they are, I feel like, and um, working in that way, like in the moment.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. Well, and I love that. I'm so thrilled to see that you saw the connections between the film too, because that they very much feel like neighbor works that have a lot of kind of like root connections. Where, for those
Mhm.
of you watching that haven't seen the film, it's made with overhead projectors that are overlaid to create these light layers, and and Lacey is working also in this like light layering. So there's like kind of a material similarity. But what
Yeah.
we're also really excited about is how even with this kind of prioritization of layers, there's this like conceptual link too of like they're very much looking at how do we care and what does care look like, and you're looking at like how these systems shape us, and I think there is like a thread of like there's what we can do for ourselves and there's how the systems shape us, and they kind of come together in this soup of who we end up being. So um
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
Well, and
think also like how we care for each other, how we care for the environment. I think that it envelops like so many important ideas.
yeah. Well, and one thing, this is like maybe very detailed, but something I was really curious about personally. So the artists in the film were really interested in particularly the spine as like a
Mhm.
visual metaphor for
Mhm.
like the self and solidness. And there are a couple, like a small segment, including Reconfiguration 67 of your series that include the skeleton. And I was wondering, I like just got really curious about like why the skeleton appeared and how you were interested in that part of figuration, where it kind of changed from being the outsides mixed together to also like the insides mixed together. And I was just really curious about that part of things.
Yeah, I'll go over here. There's another skeleton over here.
Awesome.
Um, I'm trying to make it interesting here. Um,
It's so exciting to get to see all of these.
yeah, so I think like with the skeleton and like the layering of the silk with the other images, um, I kind of was thinking about this interior, exterior, and how can you show those things simultaneously, but also like I'm super into the grotesque, and it's interesting how we think of like our guts and our insides to be gross, but they're always like they're us. That's who we are. So and plus like me and my nephew have this affinity with like monsters and like things like that. So, like as far as the imagery is, it's something is just in a formal way, the way that the parts are interconnected, and make up the body. But then also like showing that idea of interior, exterior. Um, what was the other thing I was going to say? Um, and I don't know, like the idea of the spine is like having this like in in the film, strength and vulnerability, and um, I don't know, thinking about like the theme of care, it seems to me like where there is sensitivity, there's also this opportunity to demonstrate care. And so I don't know, like I think the skeleton goes back to like all those traditions in memento mori, but also thinking about like life cycles. Um, the photogram, the collage you mentioned earlier with the baby, that was just in a show at JMU that was called Mothering, and that had a skeleton on it too with like a baby doll. And so I was looking at these themes of gestation, decay, life cycle, also very much associated with the feminine body. So I think those are the reason, some of the reasons why I kind of it keeps reappearing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that so you've touched on and kind of alluded to your current work, and I would love to for you to talk about that more too, because there's earlier you mentioned it's kind of like a weird or not weird, like an expansion connection. So it's so you're moving from like this idea of systems of like human systems or like human interconnection to like a more than human view of things that includes like the natural world. And I would love to hear about like what you're exploring in that work and how you see it connected to this idea of like how we're entangled and what kind of where you're heading with those ideas. Sorry for the messiest question on the planet.
Yeah, I'm definitely still working through it, but like working with the plants, I think is what led me to work more on this new series. So this is kind of like an inflection point here where there's like the human parts and the non-human parts kind of coming together, and I was observing a lot of plants in the environment, and just like the simple act of observing the land around me and like starting to contemplate what is my relationship to the land and other living things, and thinking about like is it could be productive to move beyond like a human centric perspective, right? Especially if we're talking about pressing issues that are happening now with climate change. And then like visibly like being in the wildfire smoke and seeing it out my window while I'm working, it just like it encouraged me to kind of move forward with this other sense of urgency and think kind of zoom out, right? And think about ecology more. So the other work that I'm working on now with drawing and painting, um, over here, this is one example of something I'm working on now, some ideas. So there are still like these figurative elements, but then other more than human beings are included, and this idea of interconnection, the braid symbolizing interconnectivity, and again, that idea of entanglement where um, what are generative spaces or transformational spaces where self and other dissolve, I guess, so we can think about how to care for other things and move beyond kind of like an anthropocentric point of view that might help us, better our situation in the environment also. Um, so authors like Donna Haraway, she wrote a book called When Species Meet. And she's really in this poetic language, like describing all these interspecific uh, relationships where these bodies are knotted together. So like the visuals of that is really inspiring to me. And just thinking about environments where we bump up against difference can open up new possibilities too. So that's kind of where the imagery is going. And I think the media shift is also due to, like if I'm working in a media for a few years, sometimes you just need to switch gears also.
Yeah, totally. That's really exciting. Like, and I've been excited to follow on like the pieces that you've created so far in that series, and like to see where it goes. Because I think you do have an excellent eye for like finding like how we position, like for interrogating how we position ourselves in systems, and like giving us visual tools for like stretching our understanding, which is really important and to like to like generating change or like openness to different thoughts and ideas. So I think that's real cool. And I'm so glad you mentioned like the idea of braiding. That's like very interesting and evocative. It made me think of a lot of like performance where like I believe Allison Knowles has a performance piece entitled Braid, where you braid each other's hair, you braid your hair together, and there's this long. It's a rich symbolism history of like this idea of connection, and also to the feminine, which is like a clear like through line in your work, and very
Yeah,
excited.
totally.
Sorry for my rambles, but like I'm so
No, I
excited
love
for
it.
that.
Yeah, I could talk all day about it. Yeah, I'll have to look at that specific reference that you're talking about. And I was also thinking, I got the idea of braids from Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, and she talks about like the fit, like how you're describing it, like how braiding is an act of care. So
Yeah.
to loop it back with
To
our
loop it
theme.
back. So amazing. Well, I mean, those are the major questions I had. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about with the work or that is exciting to you that you want to share?
I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground, so thank you. You're a wonderful interviewer. I feel like I'm with Terry Gross right now.
Huge compliment.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm just looking forward to this year. I have like a couple activities going on. I'm doing a residency in January at Foundation House in Greenwich, Connecticut. So they'll have an open house, and that'll be fun to connect with people. This series that's on our postcard Reconfiguration is going to be in a solo exhibition in October at the Holter Museum of Art. So that will be exciting for me just to like have them all in one um, in one venue where there will be some that I haven't shown before to kind of get some perspective on it. So yeah, that's what's
Is
coming
that
up.
the Holter Museum in Montana? The
Yeah, it's in Montana.
I did a lot of work in Montana for a while, and that's a beautiful museum. Like I've been there, and that'll be such a great
Oh,
space for your work. So that's really exciting.
oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome that you've been there. I've never been even to Montana, so I'm excited to travel.
Oh, you'll love it. Helena's really a great place to be too. The people who run that museum are super nice. So that'll be awesome for you.
Oh, totally. So cool.
Well, again, thanks for chatting, and I hope people take a time and get this, see the movie, see the connection. This is such beautiful, rich work. And thanks for showing us all the full scale of it and all of the pieces in your studio. Really grateful to get to know you and present your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John, for
Take
sharing.
care. You too. Bye.